Hello, 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 welcome. It's Galacron here. We are doing Hercules again. So we're going to go into Hercules in labor. Of course, again, Heracles would be his Greek name, and the Roman name equivalency is Hercules. The world of archaic Greece took personal responsibility to much greater lengths than does the more forgiving modern era. Any modern court would take one look at the charge sheet and immediately exonerate Hercules of infanticide and murder. Again, his wife Megara and his kids, which, wasn't his fault. Unfortunately, it's hard to prove your stepmom cursed you with madness and illusion and delusion, and then you fought your own family and killed them. It's hard to actually prove that actually happened. It did happen, but it's kind of one of those things. It's like, well, how do you prove that happened? And you sit there and go, I don't actually know. And all you can say is like, well, I wouldn't kill my own wife and children. Like, well, there's been other men that have done that. What if they just say the same thing? Oh, I was cursed with madness. So it's unfortunate. Not only do we have the confessions of the true perpetrators, Lisa and Hera, Queen Hera herself, she confessed, but even at the time, impartial eyewitnesses immediately realized that Hercules was in the grip of insanity when he perpetrated the hideous deed of killing off his family. That was Megara and the children they had together. So, however, while he was patiently innocent from a modern viewpoint, none of these excuses let our hero off the hook by the standards of his own day, back in 400 BC or whatever. So, those standards were simple. Hercules did it. So Hercules was guilty. We know he isn't, but at the time of the tale told, what would everybody say? Everybody would probably say the same thing. He did it. Means he's guilty. Blameless, but guilty. In exactly the same way, a generation later, Oedipus would blind himself in acknowledgement that he had killed his father and slept with his mother. This despite the fact that he had striven mightily to prevent those very deeds. One can see the point in an age without proper forensic tools, obviously. It was all too easy for the perpetrator of a criminal act to pass responsibility to the influence of a malign god. Well, I mean, even today, don't we have people that do that? Oh, someone's god or whatever told me to commit a crime. Furthermore, homicidal tendencies were only acceptable on the battlefield in war. That goes on today even. Or in the course of everyday heroic activity. Well, how do you discern that? Oh, well, I was being a hero, so it's okay for me to kill. I was acting heroically. So I wonder about that. So, a slayer who was evidently and irredeemably deranged might be innocent, but must nevertheless be put down for the general safety of the community. The key term here is irredeemably deranged. Hercules' future would be decided by his reaction when he regained consciousness after Athena kind of knocked him out, including whether he had a future at all. Euripides takes up the tale once more with Amphitryon, well aware of the risk that Hercules might remain homicidally insane when he woke up. So Amphitryon also knew that if this was the case, then Hercules would take some putting down, kill him. He cautions mourners Here's the stitch of Euripides. Gently with your dirge of woe, old friends, otherwise he might wake, break his chains, and destroy the house. Tear me to pieces, and then do the same to the city. Run, run, my aged friends, escape his waking fury. For soon as he runs amok through the streets of Thebes, he will pile fresh corpses upon those already slain. Okay, so we get back into it. To the relief of his audience, Hercules awakened from his sleep in full possession of his senses. Normal. There came now the painful task of updating him on what had happened during his madness. A child of his era, Hercules immediately acknowledged his own guilt. Okay, so we do have another stitch from Euripides. Alas, why do I spare my own life when I have taken that of my dear children? Perhaps I should rush to leap from a cliff, or maybe avenge having split my children's blood by driving a sword through my own heart. If I throw my body into the fire, I shall at least avoid the infamy which would otherwise follow through my life. It goes on. Now, my dearest friends will see me exposed to the pollution incurred by my children's murder. What am I to do? Where shall I find release from my misery? Shall I take wings off a cliff or plunge beneath the earth? I am so ashamed of the evil I have done. Now you must allow me to veil my head in the darkness of death. Fresh with new blood guilt, I do not want to harm other innocents. We get further into the stitch here. Why then should I go on living? What is the good of a useless, damned life? No, let gorgeous Hera dance in bliss. Let Zeus's wife strike the sparkling floors of Olympus with her divine slipper. She has achieved her goal. She has toppled me in my prime, right down to the foundations. What man would pray to such a goddess? Her jealousy over her husband's visit to the bed of a mortal woman has driven her to destroy a blameless man who has done nothing but good for humanity. That's the end of the stitch from Euripides. So, we get back into it. There are different accounts of what happened next. Since he was manifestly recovered from his insanity, the Thebans did not have the painful task of killing the hero, their hero, in self-defense. So yeah, he wasn't crazy anymore when he woke up. The curse was over, done. The curse of madness was over. Nevertheless, Hercules was shunned for his guilt. According to some stories, Hercules remained at home, nursed through his depression by his parents. However, other texts agree that at this point Hercules embraced the sentiment that the gallant man endures without flinching the blows of heaven. Aware of his blood guilt, he exiled himself from Thebes and his home of ill memory and sought expiation in Athens. However, so great was his crime that only great deeds could clean the pollution from his soul. Again, Delphi prompted Hercules to go to Mycenae, the oracle at Delphi. Go to Mycenae and there place himself in the service of King Eurystheus, Hercules' cousin, which he's like, dude, he's so inferior to me. Why would I go to him? So, it was still his sentiment at the time. It was told to him beforehand, and then after the death of his family, he went to the Oracle of Delphi again the second time, and then he said the same thing. Or she, depending on who was on duty at the time. Most of the time I hear it's a woman, but she said, yeah, go to King Eurystheus. And again, he said, dude, it's my scumbag cousin who is nothing to me. Like, by light years, he's inferior. Doesn't matter if he's a king. He's inferior to me. Like, I'm Hercules. So, according to some sources, it was only now that our hero gained the name Heracles. By this version of the story, the Delphic oracle informed him that great glory would be earned through expunging the malice of Hera. This would be the glory of Hera, which is Heracles. That's the meaning of Heracles, the name. That because of her vindictiveness, Hera's victim would become immortal in legend and earn a place in the heavens, which is Mount Olympus. Rather than destroying Hercules as intended, his name would make clear that Hera herself had made Hercules the legendary hero he would become. That's irony, because, you know, she hated Zeus's philandering, and Hercules is a result of that. Hercules is the blood son of Zeus. So Hera takes it out on him. Cursing him with madness, he kills his whole family because of the curse. So now the oracle's like, well, you're going to have to go do the 10 labors, later would turn to 12. And it's going to be serving King Eurystheus. So Queen Hera didn't even know it. But throughout all this mess, she will inadvertently turn Hercules, who she hates, into a glorified legend to all the people, and even gods would recognize Hercules as one of the biggest heroic legends ever. So that's irony for you, if there ever was any. The idea appealed to Hercules and would have resonated with an audience familiar with the saying that to be avenged on his enemies, all a man need do was to prosper mightily. Well, that's exactly what Hercules does. It was hard to fight with the goddess, but the oracle had shown Hercules the way. He would become famous, nay, glorious, and by his name the world would know that it was Hera who had driven him to such epic success. Yes, this is true. I don't think Hera wanted it that way. She wanted to kill Heracles. So again, irony. The evil deed Hera had inspired could not be undone. No, they're dead. His family's dead. But it could be made to backfire on its perpetrator, which it kind of did. I mean, Hercules, you know, went down in history as a legend. And she prompted this. Sorry, we must plug in. So anyways, yeah. Hera prompted it. So, humbled, Hercules, the child killer, would place himself in the power of King Eurystheus. Even as the gods had ordained, then, by the deeds he would perform, Hercules would expiate his crime in such a fashion that the world would remember his name even after the name of Hera herself was half forgotten. The labors of Hercules were an act of revenge. So King Eurystheus, a stitch from, the Iliad. Here's the stitch. Father Zeus, Lord of the Lightning, I have hurried with news for your ear. This day a fine child has been born. He is called Eurystheus, who again would be king. It should have been Hercules in that throne, but Hera saw that it was Eurystheus, his cousin. Strength. Oh, broad strength. Anyway. Son to Sthenelus, son of Perseus. He is of your line, which is proper as he shall reign over the Greeks. The king of Mycenae was not a happy man, King Eurystheus. The head that wears the crown is proverbially uneasy, and in this case it was doubly so, because the wearer of the crown was well aware that it should have been Hercules underneath the thing. Well, yeah, Hercules was supposed to be king, but Hera made sure that Eurystheus was born first, and he got to be king by the rules. Eurystheus had no easy job in any case, being a Peloped in a land still sympathetic to the Perseids. The rise of fame of Hercules had caused disquiet to King Eurystheus. And even greater disquiet was caused by the manner of that rise. If Hercules could lead the disarmed and the defenseless Thebans to a crushing victory over the power of Orchomenus, what might he do later when properly set up and ready to take his throne by force from King Eurystheus? Well, I understand that from King Eurystheus's point of view. What if Hercules was put in a certain position and he had an army or a group or whatever, and what if he just killed King Eurystheus and said, I'm king now? So I get that from King Eurystheus. I understand him thinking that way. The fact that Hercules hated and despised King Eurystheus had raised a matching antipathy in Eurystheus. After all, Hercules was being more than somewhat hypocritical. He loudly announced his misfortune in being the blameless son of Alcmene and Zeus. Yet, Hercules, who denounced Hera for hating him only because of his birth, at the same time hated King Eurystheus for exactly the same reason. Well, technically he's right. King Eurystheus was like, dude, I was born and born king. Why are you hating on me when, dude, I was born king? It's not like I chose. I didn't have a choice. So it is kind of interesting to look at it from King Eurystheus' standpoint. Whether Hercules liked it or not, Eurystheus was king of Mycenae by right of birth and the proclamation of Zeus, and through no duplicity on his own part. Well, obviously, he had not chosen his role, and was very much a pawn in a game much larger than himself. Without any wrongdoing on his part, the machinations of others had made King Eurystheus the target of a hugely powerful, vindictive, and homicidal hero. As King Eurystheus pointed out, Hercules was not the only victim in this story. He had a pretty good claim to that status himself. Much later, he explained to Alcmene. So I do understand. King Eurystheus is like, well, this has nothing to do with me. Why does it have to be me that puts Hercules through the 12 labors? And he'll end up hating me. He already hates me because he thinks it should have been him in this throne and wearing this crown. And I was born into it and just made king. And now you're sicking Hercules on me, who he already hates, and I'm going to put him through 12 labors of hell? Well, what if he survives and comes back and kills me for it? So he didn't like any of this. And I don't blame him. If I were him, I wouldn't like this either. So we have a stitch from Euripides. It was not I who chose to start this feud. Which technically, no, it wasn't. Certainly I was born cousin and kinsman to Heracles, your son, but this affliction was brought on me by the divine power of Queen Hera, whether I wanted it or not. I never undertook to be his foe, and yet I had to enter into this struggle. Naturally, I set myself to devise trouble in abundance. From time to time, my midnight scheming bore fruit, as I learned how to push aside and slay my foes. And yes, I had to learn also to push aside fear of the future. That son of yours was not a nobody, but a man indeed. Oh yes, he was my enemy, but I shall speak well of him, because he was a man of worth. So, we get back into it. And now Hercules was on his way to place himself in the service of King Eurystheus. There was no need for Queen Hera to point out how advantageous it would be for the king if his mighty rival died in the course of his duties. At one stroke, Eurystheus would become more secure on his throne. Nor would he have to dread that day when Hercules came and did the deed that in his madness he had already imagined doing. So again, it's like, well, King Eurystheus is like, I don't know what's going to happen. This is a whole thing. 10 years of service, which turned out to be 12. So 1 labor per year. Okay? But again, the King Eurystheus is like, you know what? If he's going to kill me, he's going to kill me. If it happens, it happens. It's the will of the gods. Blah, 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 blah. The oracle had decreed that Hercules had to perform 10 tasks for King Eurystheus. Again, it does turn out to be 12. Originally, it was 10. One can imagine that a certain amount of midnight scheming was spent in the devising of these tasks as we look at the labors of Hercules over the coming chapters. Because Queen Hera, stuck her claws right into King Eurystheus. She was there invisible, talking to King Eurystheus, saying, make him do this, make him do that. So that has to be duly noted. As we look at the labors of Hercules over the coming chapters, we note certain points in common. One of these is that the tasks brought Eurystheus no personal gain. That was kind of interesting. Like, why not say, go get all this gold from over there and bring it to me and I get the gold. So that was interesting. This is something to ponder upon. Why did King Eurystheus not use Hercules as his personal battering ram against the armies and cities of his enemies? Another good question. Like, what if he had this kingdom over there that hated him, and he's like, Hercules, I want you to go over there and just kill the whole kingdom, all those people, and destroy the kingdom. And King Eurystheus never asked him to do something like that. Or alternatively, why not send Hercules to obtain precious stones, like I mentioned gold, but, precious stones and rare spices to fill his treasury. Yet Eurystheus set no such tasks. The labors set for Hercules were either pointless or of benefit to humanity as a whole. This tells us something about King Eurystheus. He had been chosen as the arbiter and supervisor of the labors of Hercules. The nature of the tasks chosen had to be difficult, bordering on impossible, which I agree on that. Otherwise, they would fail to meet the standard devised by Delphi, and indeed sought by Hercules himself in his vengeful quest for immortal glory. At the same time, King Eurystheus had already a wary eye on the future and time when, if Hercules completed his appointed missions. At that point, Eurystheus became redundant to the needs of Hercules and the plans of the gods. The only thing that might prevent him from being promptly slain by his former servant was if he could argue that he had completed the duty assigned to him fairly, impartially, and without personal gain. So that is kind of interesting to extrapolate. So, not that any such arguments would impress Hercules himself, but it would work in the court of public opinion. So he knows, King Eurystheus still knows, like, even though I'm not asking him to do something for my personal gain, explicitly, if he does kill me, the public opinion will still be for me, even though I'll be dead. Since one reason Hercules was doing the labors was to boost his public image, it would only detract from the hero's glory if he unfairly killed the judge who was simply doing the job that Delphi and the gods had ordered. So for King Eurystheus, personal gain was out. He was like, no, that's going to make me look bad if I, if the gods tell the oracle at Delphi to send Hercules to me, a king, so he can dispense with the, the evil that he had already done, and he wants to purify his soul of evil. Oh, the madness, I killed my family, I have to purify my soul and cleanse my soul with labors that are almost impossible for them to turn on King Eurystheus. Like, dude, I didn't ask for this. So it'd be unfair to kill me when the gods are the ones who ordered it. So it'd be unfair for Hercules to kill me. He could, but King Eurystheus is trying to say, like, hey, I'm not asking him to do anything that would benefit me directly. Gold, jewels, kill enemies of me personally. He didn't ask him to do that stuff. So he's, I guess trying to make a claim. It'd be unfair to kill me when this is what the gods ordered through the oracle at Delphi. So King Eurystheus is like, I never wanted any of this to begin with. It'd be unfair. Which he would be correct. We also note something of a geographical progression of the labors. The first 6 were all in the Peloponnese, because the kingdom of Eurystheus had indeed problems of a monstrous nature well suited to a Herculean solution. Monsters. Once these had been dealt with, King Eurystheus devised missions which would take Hercules away from Mycenae, away from Greece, and to the very edges of the known world. Not only was there the hope that Hercules might encounter something insurmountably lethal on his travels, but the execution of each mission then became an end in itself. That is, it got Hercules far away from Eurystheus for as long was superhumanly possible. Another thing each labor should accomplish was that it should directly or indirectly put Hercules on a collision course with one or more of the most fearsome creatures known in the world of myth. That's true. And there were a fair few such creatures about. That is an understatement. On further reflection, we can see that Eurystheus extended this line of thought into a new direction, one based on the fact that some of the most fearful creatures known to mankind lived on top of Mount Olympus. Well, is he referring to the gods themselves when he says this? Hercules was not known for his tact or diplomatic skills. Queen Hera nursed a deadly hatred for Hercules. That's a double entendre, I think. Perhaps some tasks could be assigned which would lead to Hercules upsetting other gods. And so, augmenting the divine anti-Hercules faction, this certainly involved a certain degree of midnight scheming. because a task evidently designed to offend a god, e.g. go and punch Apollo on the nose, would rebound to the detriment of the task setter rather than the executor. So that would be too obvious if King Eurystheus said, yeah, well, you know that god Apollo? Go punch him in the face, that's a labor. Dude, that could be really, really bad for King Eurystheus to do. You don't want to piss off the gods of Mount Olympus. They might really, like, bring the hammer. So that's not a good idea. What was needed were tasks that could be accomplished without incurring divine displeasure if they were executed with subtlety and finesse. If done with brute force, mad bull at a gate style, at which Hercules excelled, then it could be pointed out to a wrathful god that the fault lay not in the task, but in how it had been carried out. If all Hercules' labors were of a type designed to upset someone divine and powerful, the gods might become suspicious of King Eurystheus. You don't want that. So moderation was the rule. Nevertheless, provoking the wrath of one deity or another was the evident intent behind at least 4 of the labors. So what they're going to get into is the first labor, which was the Nemean lion. So we will stop right there, and the next one we will pick up with the first labor, the Nemean lion. Galacron, out.